Orlando was a cow town in the middle of cow country in 1857, when it first became the seat of Orange County. Florida, especially isolated Central Florida, was quite lawless then. The Third Seminole War didn't end until May 1858, and those who chose to live here were a pretty rough lot. Benjamin Caldwell, an Alabama man who owned considerable land in Central Florida, donated 4 acres for the site of the county courthouse, a square bounded by what became Magnolia Avenue, Central Avenue, Court Street, and Wall Street. Courthouse Square was the center of town and quickly became the focal point of activity. The first courthouse was a simple log structure built on the site in 1863, and it certainly provided much entertainment as cattle rustlers and highwaymen were brought to justice and tried there. This courthouse burned down in 1868. Some believe it was set aflame by cattle rustlers whose cases were due to be tried. The fire destroyed the records as well as the buildings, so the cases never came to trial. The next 2 buildings were frame construction. The second, a 2-story structure built in 1869 and replaced by a 3-story courthouse in 1875. The second and presumably the third also served as church, schoolhouse, dance hall, and general assembly. Both were moved and replaced in 1892 by a red brick Romanesque revival edifice that became an iconic symbol of Orlando civic pride, much as the Lake Eola fountain is today. By the 1920s, Orlando had grown dramatically, and it was time to replace the old courthouse with a newer, larger building, although the red brick courthouse wasn't actually torn down until 1958. In 1927, the county built a new structure just north of the square on land purchased from the adjacent Episcopal Church, both in the neoclassical revival style, which was waning in popularity. Its architecture was outdated from the beginning, but was no less significant. It was a magnificent building with 2 courtrooms, jury rooms, and a jail on the 5th floor that could house up to 132 inmates. During its 70-odd years of service as a courthouse, before it was replaced in 1998 by the present courthouse 3 blocks north, it witnessed some of the most chaotic events in our history. The Great Depression, World War II, the Korean War, desegregation, the Vietnam War, and many prominent court cases, the most famous of which was the Ted Bundy trial. Fast forward to 2009. The old courthouse had become Orange County Regional History Center. Kissimmee Paranormal Investigations was preparing to conduct an investigation of the center. Lois Lee, a psychic and paranormal investigator with the group, entered the History Center with high expectations. Previous paranormal excursions had discovered several entities. In courtroom A, Lois wandered around for some time, then sat in a chair at the defense table. Not thinking of anything in particular, she dropped into a trance-like state and her breathing became heavy and fast. She began experiencing emotions of fear and anger, and she felt her chair being bumped forward. Her teammates started asking her questions, but she was incoherent. At one point, she screamed in terror, "I didn't do it, I didn't do it," but at the same time thinking that he did do it, whatever it or whoever he was. Then, inexplicably, she felt her hands and legs beginning to tingle and started to go to sleep. The tingling, buzzing sensation became so severe that she felt her circulation was completely cut off. And she gasped, something unintelligible about being handcuffed. She began pounding her hands on the table to bring back the circulation, but the sensation spread through her whole body. Sharp, excruciating pains jabbed her side, and she shouted, let go, let go, let go." Now much alarmed, her teammates grabbed her and escorted her out of the room into the hallway, where she shook her hands and stomped her feet to bring back the circulation. Lois never did learn who he was, but she doesn't rule out the possibility that it might have been someone who had experienced an electrocution. When a local radio station was housed across the street from the courthouse, employees working late in the evening often reported lights moving around, shouts, moans, cell doors slamming, and maybe even the sound of what might have been gunfire. There had been shootings at the courthouse before. None of these reports were verified, however. Other paranormal investigators have had contact with the male presumed to be a lawyer who paces back and forth in courtroom A. Some have encountered 2 entities, one of whom might be a judge and the other who might actually be Ted Bundy. The jury foreman's chair also sometimes turns and faces whoever is walking about the courtroom. Just as in our present courthouse, where space has been set aside for the children of witnesses, defendants, and observers, similar accommodations were made in the old courthouse by using the jury room just across the back hall from the courtroom, from courtroom A, when it was not otherwise occupied. In the jury room, many have met Emily, a little girl who apparently spends most of her time there, but has on occasion been seen in the hallway between the jury room and courtroom A and in other areas. She is apparently a sweet child who likes to play. Some have brought toys for her and have reported actually interacting with her as she plays. Others have also reported a dour woman and a man thought to be a bailiff in the jury room, both of whom tried to stay in the background. Perhaps they were there to supervise the children or to assist the jurors sitting in session. On her first visit, when Lois had experienced the electrocution, she also got a fleeting glimpse of Emily at the entrance to the courtroom. But the child almost instantly vanished when two of Lois's team members came into the room. Lois also picked up a male who might have been the lawyer others had experienced, but that contact too was fleeting. On her second visit, some of the other investigators reported a male presence in the jury room, so Lois went in and sat down, waiting for something to happen. Soon she sensed a man thought to be a lawyer. He seemed to be contented, middle-aged man, probably from around the 1930s. He wore a white fedora and glasses. Lois described him as respectably round. He was at first reluctant to make contact, but as she spoke softly to him, he gradually moved closer, at one point setting off a motion detector. That alarmed him, and he wanted to know what the contraption was. Lois explained that by waving his hand in front of the EMF meter, he could make the lights flash up and down, and in that way communicate with them. By asking a series of questions, she learned a little about him. Either his name was Clay or he was from Clay County. He wasn't clear about that. Excuse me. He was a gentleman who enjoyed fishing but not golf during his lifetime. He was a defense lawyer who was proud that he'd kept more innocent people out of jail than he'd gotten guilty parties acquitted. He didn't have any contact with the other spirits in the area, and he didn't like to be around people. During the evening ghost tours in the museum, he often hid in the jury room. Joanne, my ghost ferret, Sue and I visited on a cold, dreary December day. The center was quiet. While Sue and I interviewed Miss Cynthia Melendez, the curator of collections, and Dr. Tana Porter, the research librarian, Joanne wandered around. Later, over lunch at the Daily News down the street, Joanne shared the paranormal activity she had experienced. She had gone first to courtroom A and sat quietly in several locations. She didn't encounter much. The judge's bench was highly energized, but she had found nothing specific. The same was true at the defendant's table where Ted Bundy's name is carved. Lots of energy surrounded the area, but there was nothing specific or intimidating. However, in the jury room, she came across a tall, slender man with dark hair and a mustache. He did not interact with her in any way but paced back and forth, appearing to be deep in thought. Joanne sensed that he was probably a lawyer and was considering a case he was involved in. He was definitely not the talkative, stout fellow Lois Lee had encountered earlier. On the fourth floor, Joanne met a little girl in a pinafore sitting on the steps of the cracker cabin there. She was about 6 years old and seemed to be very happy, playing quietly by herself. Joanne wasn't able to engage the little girl, who might have been Emily, the child others had seen in the jury room and courtroom A, but she watched her for several minutes. Joanne found nothing else, but considering it was daytime with much activity going on, it was probably a wonder that she experienced anything at all. The Orange County Regional History Center is still one of the finest buildings in Orlando and an excellent museum. Let's hope the ghosts there appreciate it as much as those still living do. And that's the courthouse across the street. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.